A couple of weeks ago, I went over again, or reminisced again, about the aptitude test to which I was subjected as a high school freshman. As I said then, there were various units which were designed to show both our weaknesses and our strengths so that we might better know a direction for our lives. But the only weakness which stands out in my mind was the same one that stood out 2 weeks ago, and that was that I was not encouraged to be a surgeon because of my dexterity, or actually because of my lack of dexterity. But probably the most puzzling part of the test was the personality test, because it was a unit designed not to determine our abilities, but to determine our interest. What sparked an idea or a flame within our minds? After all, it stands to reason if you're interested in what you're doing, you're more likely to enjoy your work. Accordingly, a variety of questions were asked, like, would you rather work inside or outside? Would you rather work with your mind or with your hands? Would you rather work with people or work alone? Would you rather work behind the desk or in the field? Would you rather live in a city or a rural community? Would you rather work on developing new products or maintaining existing products? Would you rather work on a flexible schedule or at a fixed pace? And would you rather travel or remain in one location? But every so often, just so that they could garner a more comprehensive view of your personality, they would sneak in a question like, would you rather wear a suit or blue jeans to work? At the end, the psychologist who had put the test together felt they could develop a fairly accurate snapshot of who you really were and where your interests lay. But even at the time, I felt that some of the conclusions drawn from the personality questions were questionable. The only answers were to be those of a yes, no, this, that, one, or the other variety. Our answers were to be absolutes. There was absolutely no accounting for degrees. But unfortunately, our lives are very rarely divided into such black and white absolutes. Much of our life is based on the degrees found in those shades of gray. We may feel 80% for and 20% against something. On the other hand, we may feel 60% against and 40% for something else. And how many times in our lives do we find that our answers are really proven to be more of a 51% to 49%, or even a 50-50, where we really have no preference? But the aptitude test demanded an absolute decision based on spur-of-the-moment reasoning. Now, in a lot of ways, I wish I could go back now, knowing what I know of life, and try the aptitude section again and compare my current responses to the answers of my 14-year-old self. But note, I did not say I'd like to go back and try the dexterity section again, because my dexterity is no more nimble now than it was then. Now, in chapter 7 of Ecclesiastes, Solomon walks us through that same kind of thinking. He gives us absolutes. And on the surface, we might argue they are not so absolute in our lives, that they are, again, those shades of gray, and we need to realize that shade of gray. But fortunately, Solomon's not arguing from the spur of the moment. He doesn't look out the window of his life to see the current conditions. He bases his findings on his extensive research, on his experimentation to which he subjected himself, and to the wisdom of his years. And so even though his answers may at first seem to be arbitrary, they are not. And so this morning we ask, do we really need all the answers? And this is a big question for our lives, because there are a lot of us who think if we don't have every answer, if we don't nail down every fact, if we don't understand every bit of reasoning behind something, we can't get behind it ourselves. Do we really need all the answers? Chapter 7, verse 1. A good name is better than a good ointment, and the day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. Solomon starts off on a very positive note. And so our first question is, would you rather have a good name or good health? Most of us immediately realize the need to feel good, the need to have good health, the need to be vital in our lives in order to even enjoy our lives. One of the most lovable ladies in this congregation swears by the liniment she buys over at Tractor Supply Company. She says it's helped her shoulder when nothing other than surgery was supposed to. She tells her friends and family members who now buy it as well for other aches and pains and how they're feeling better for it. And I'll tell you the truth, even your preacher has a bottle of it that he rubs on his hands every so often when they start to feel maybe just a little arthritic. After the price went up $1 a bottle, I jokingly told the lady that all her goodwill was upping the demand and thereby upping the price. And so most of us appreciate the need for good health in our lives. In fact, that need was made even more apparent this week as Governor Cooper made it a statewide requirement to wear masks in public so that we would not endanger others with COVID-19. But Solomon assures us there is something better for our hurts than even the very best of ointments. A good name is the best balm for our pains. You know, most of us think a lot more about our personal health than we do about our personal integrity, but Solomon is plainly arguing that even under the sun, a man is only as healthy as his reputation. He's only as strong as his character. He's only as positive as his life force. Because integrity is better than industry. Simply because a man is industrious is no reason to believe that he possesses good character. In fact, many men who are so busy making money have no character at all. Moral fiber is better than memorable faith. You know, in the era of Public Enemy number 1, we might immediately recall Bonnie and Clyde, John Dillinger, Pretty Boy Floyd, and Babyface Nelson. In more recent times, we might think of the Dapper Don or Teflon Don, John Gotti. The flamboyance of all sparked widespread popularity, elevating them almost to celebrity status. However, their exploits immediately illustrate that simply being memorable is never enough. A full character is better than a full bank account. Aside from those already listed, we might also think of Bernie Madoff and other Ponzi schemes. We might think of Enron and its investment scandal, or we might consider the home state savings fraud. Billions of dollars have been misappropriated, fraudulently invested, and they've built tens of thousands of investors. Undoubtedly, even in Solomon's day, there were unscrupulous people who took advantage of those around them. So Solomon is referring to a man's purity and his real value in this life. And it's also done the same in his Proverbs. A good reputation is preferable to riches, and the approval of others is better than precious silver or gold. Simply attaining wealth and position is not enough. For good or ill, we make a mark on the lives of others by how we actually live, what we actually do, how the deeds of our lives touch on the deeds of theirs. And so then Solomon presses on by noting a good death is better than an easy birth. The day of one's death is better than the day of one's birth. And there are those who dismiss the second half of this couplet as merely intriguing but not meaningful. And perhaps for the Christian that's true, because we're familiar with Paul's proclamation to the Philippians, for to me to live is Christ and to die is gain. We look at a different eternity. We look at a different outcome. We look at a different ending than just strictly life under the sun. But we need to remember that Solomon is not looking to that eternal end. He is viewing the outcome of life upon this planet under the sun. And even under that restriction, Solomon concludes that a man's death is better than his birth. And that's true because it is as a man passes that his character is truly noted for what it is. Only then do men know the full impact of another man's character. It's at the end of life when man has proven the value of his existence. You don't prove anything when you're in the cradle except that you're hungry and that you have to have your diaper changed and that you need mama to come and give you a glass of milk or a glass of water or a pat on the head or whatever. And a good man who dies and leaves behind a good reputation is truly notable for the rarity of his existence, if nothing else. You know, we remember the past presidents because in a nation of 330 million people, only 44 men have held that office. Remember that Grover Cleveland was both the 22nd and 24th president. So instead of 45 men, we only have 44 men, even though we've had 45 presidents. We tend to exaggerate their good and we overlook their flaws. Unlike Shakespeare's Caesar, when Mark Antony notes the evil that men do lives after them, the good is often interred with their bones. But when one is born, the slate is clean. Nothing's been determined. Our lives are an open book, simply waiting to be penned. No one can predict the kind of life we might live or the kinds of trouble we might have to face. We write the chapter of our lives through our deeds, and it's only when the book is finished that we get the final, complete picture of the men we are. And we're too familiar with those who've had success only to throw it away and to be more remembered for their failure. Sports figures who have later bet on or even fixed games lose all their notoriety, all their fame, all their worthiness in an instant. Noted celebrities are charged with heinous crimes. Politicians are involved in scandals. Teachers are accused of abusing students. Religious men are guilty of embezzlement and adultery, or worse. Yes, the good man who leaves behind a good reputation is truly a rarity. Few live their lives in such a way that integrity and honor become their creed. In the 20th verse, Solomon records, "Indeed, there is not a righteous man on earth who continually does good and never sins." What was true 30 centuries ago is equally true today. And so it comes down to the question, would you rather have a good name or good health? And our answer matters. Because our answer dictates the kind of life we will live. Then Solomon makes us consider another question. Would you rather go to a funeral or to a party? Now, most of us don't have any trouble answering this question. Funerals are sad. They're filled with people whose hearts are breaking. They're solemn. And on the other hand, parties are joyous times. People are celebrating. They may be raucous and fun. They offer diversion to our otherwise dreary and drab lives. But unfortunately, here the typical answer is equally wrong. Solomon says the funeral is better because a funeral offers us a warning. Verse 2. It's better to go to a house of mourning than to go to a house of feasting, because that is the end of every man, and the living takes it to heart. And we need to know that Solomon says it is the end of every man, not that it's the end of all men. Solomon makes the house of mourning a very personal time of reflection. You know this man specifically. You know his deeds. You know his life. You know his failures. You know his pluses. You know his family. You know exactly how he has lived. And while man is typically drawn to the festive occasions, which may alleviate our suffering, such times do not offer us the lasting value of reflection on the one we The house of mourning offers us the confrontation of life and death. The issues found here are grave issues which can radically determine our lives from that moment forward. And here we're forced to take a hard look at man, not only the life of the one who has passed, but also our own sojourn upon this planet. Because only by looking at the failure in the life of another will we be pressed to look for a more suitable end for our own lives. I love Tim McGraw's old song, "Live Like You Were Dying." I think it speaks to this kind of reflection. I asked him when it sank in that this might really be the real end, how's it hit you when you get that kind of news? He said, I went skydiving, I went Rocky Mountain climbing, I went 2.7 seconds on a bull named Fu Manchu. I loved deeper, I spoke sweeter, and I gave forgiveness that I'd been denying. And he said, someday I hope you get the chance to live like you were dying. Now, obviously, that man has had a wake-up call about his life. And on the surface, it seems like he might simply be trying to fulfill his bucket list, but he's also loving, deeper, speaking, sweeter, and forgiving where he's not before. And while most of us won't hear the tune when we're at a funeral, its intent should be a part of our lives. We need to live like we're dying. For in that warning, a funeral changes our existence, and the living takes it to heart. You know, attending a funeral has the ability to make a permanent change in our way of thinking. It has the ability to really permanently form our heart and soul and mind in a different way than they were before. And as our thinking is changed, our lives may be challenged. The literal translation of the phrase offers us proof that there is permanence to the change, and the living gives it to his heart. You know, too many times the things we take to heart offer only momentary reflection. We take them to heart and then promptly forget them. We take it to heart and lose it a month later. We take it to heart and forget it the next time we need to make those New Year resolutions. We take it to heart, but we really don't. But the Hebrew here means the living gives it to his heart. And when we give something to our heart or mind, it becomes a part of our existence, just as the early lessons of our school days. You know, we all remember that 2 + 2 is 4. It is very much a part of our reality because it's locked in, because it doesn't fade, it doesn't go away, it's never replaced by the next crisis of our lives. We all remember that George Washington was the father of our country because it has become infused with the other facts of our lives. Nobody else is going to be the first president. Nobody else can take that role. Nobody else can assume that position. It's George Washington. If Scripture is to speak to us, it must also become an intrinsic part of our minds. It must become part of our nature. It must become a part of our existence. And the psalmist has written, thy word is a lamp to my feet and a light to my path. And Solomon has told us how that comes about. In Proverbs chapter 6, he says, my son, observe the commandment of your father, and do not forsake the teaching of your mother. Bind them continually on your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you walk about, they will guide you. When you sleep, they will watch over you. And when you awake, they will talk to you. It's not enough to hear, consider, and promptly discard. We must take the lessons learned with us as a part of our continuing and growing education. Even Moses knew the importance of facing our ultimate passing from this life. Teach us to number our days that we may present to thee a heart of wisdom. And we need to note that our wisdom is developed not in a vacuum, but in the reality of this temporary nature. Our wisdom is developed as we look upon the failures and lives of others, that we may know how to live our own. Solomon's third question is, would you rather be wise or rich? Wisdom along with an inheritance is good and an advantage to those who see the sun. For wisdom is protection just as money is protection. But the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. And in answer to the question, would you rather be wise or rich, most would probably argue that the wise are the ones who get rich. And so we don't typically think of this as a choice. Even the text may mean either the wisdom plus an inheritance is good, or that wisdom like an inheritance is good. But Solomon probably means the later. For elsewhere, he does indicate there is a choice involved. In chapter 9, verse 11, Solomon offers these words, I again saw under the sun that the race is not to the swift, and the battle is not to the warriors, and neither is bread to the wise, nor wealth to the discerning, nor favor to men of ability. For time and chance overtake them all. Life upon this earth is filled with the unexpected. There are circumstances, situations, and setbacks which will occur in the lives of men, even those who are the best prepared. And Solomon reiterates what we should know from observation. This life offers no guarantees, even to those who are prepared. Life is simply not fair. Every man does not get an equal shake in this world. Through no fault of his own, a runner may stumble. We all remember February of last year, Duke was playing North Carolina. Zion Williamson's Nike shoe had a blowout, injuring the star freshman. It wasn't about training, practice, or preparation. It was about simple equipment failure. The whole sole of his shoe blew off. And it's tough to play basketball when the sole of your shoe is just kind of flopping in the breeze. Throughout its history, Israel, often the smaller army, had soundly defeated larger, more commanding forces. In biblical history, we might think of Midian, the Philistines, and Canaanites. But from 1967, we might remember the Six-Day War with Egypt. And amazingly, the wise may be subject to forces beyond their control, which prevent them from gaining food. In the wake of the coronavirus, we must immediately think of 40 million Americans who were put out of work. But we dare not forget those in third world countries who literally earn their bread on a daily basis. And then Solomon speaks of those who have carefully considered their actions. They may have set aside a nest egg. They may have been prudent in their spending, yet even those may not gain the wealth they seek. And finally, Solomon discusses the men that we would look up to, the men who have real talent, real ability, real capability, the men who are movers and shakers, the men who can step forward, the men who have the Midas touch. They may be able to keep their lives humming along. They may be inventive, but they may not be able to muster the goodwill of those around them. It is a fact. Random chance enters into every man's life. And chances at random can defer or even derail the best laid plans. Again, Solomon is not advising against preparation, consideration, or prudence. He is simply affirming what we've all seen in our casual observations. Life is not fair. No matter how we address the issue, there will always be those who are poor. We will always have those who have poor health. There will always be those who cannot seem to get ahead. There will always be those who are simply dismissed in the presence of others. And especially in America, the land of opportunity, we all remember Ralph Waldo Emerson's statement, if a man can write a better book, preach a better sermon, or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, though he build his house in the woods, the world will make a beaten path to his door. And while it may be a truism for many, or maybe even most, Solomon has seen, as we have all seen, that it is not true for every man. There are plenty of men out there with better mousetraps who have never been called upon. There are plenty of men out there who have written good books that just never sent. There are plenty of men out there who preach good sermons and have never found the megachurch. That's just facts. No harm done. No bitterness. Just facts. But wisdom offers a lasting promise. Back to chapter 7, verse 12. Wisdom, along with an inheritance, is good and an advantage to those who see the sun. For wisdom is protection, just as money is protection. But the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. Wisdom is permanent, like an inheritance. Once the estate is settled, it belongs to the heirs. So too, once wisdom is gathered, once wisdom is garnered, once wisdom is installed, it's permanent. It is there. It is your possession, as long as you choose to make use of it. Like an inheritance, wisdom is a protection. The word Solomon uses as protection has the literal meaning of in a shadow. Wisdom and or an inheritance can literally shelter us from the heat of the day and the oppression of this earth. We can get under the shade tree and wisdom, like an inheritance, may be given to the next generation. You know, I love the commercials that advertise the life insurance to cover your final expenses. And one of their advantages is that they allow for the protection of the inheritance slated for those who follow. But how much better would it be for a man to offer a similar inheritance of wisdom to his heirs? Take all the wisdom you've attained. Take all the wisdom that you've garnered throughout your life. Take all the wisdom that you have accrued and stored in your mind and pass that on to your heirs. And because wisdom offers a lasting promise, wisdom goes beyond any ordinary inheritance. Look at the end of verse 12. But the advantage of knowledge is that wisdom preserves the lives of its possessors. Wisdom can actually keep its heirs alive when the monetary inheritance is long gone. The wise man has a better insight into what must be done to earn his daily bread. The wise man has a better aptitude and attitude about that which he must face. The wise man is more discerning of the next opportunity. The wise man is less limited in his pursuits. And again, chance plays a role in the life of every man. However, when chance plays its hand, the wise man is more capable of seeing the simple reality and moving on to the next task than the man who has otherwise simply seen his inheritance dry up. And Solomon shares the same idea in Proverbs 3. How blessed is the man who finds wisdom. Long life is in her right hand, in her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are pleasant ways, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who take hold of her, and happy are all who hold her fast. Even without the riches and honor of her left hand, wisdom is certainly worthy of our grasp. And as we began this sermon, we went back to the personality section of the aptitude test I took in high school, and I told you that even then I wondered about some of the conclusions drawn from our scant answers. It seemed to me that they were absolutes from answers which could have held varying degrees of certainty in our lives. For example, if you felt 50-50 about being inside or outside, but on the day you took the test, it was cold and rainy, your spur-of-the-moment decision might be based on what you saw through the window. Or for a high school kid facing the prom and the need to rent a tuxedo, and today they rent limos and they take you out to a 5-star restaurant and they do, it might be easier for him to say, I'd rather be in blue jeans than in a suit. For that matter, if you're sick of the stupid test, working with numbers or animals might be much more appealing than working with words. And of course, if you've always lived in the city, the idea of country life might be entirely unknown and therefore just discounted offhand. Not because you don't prefer it, but because you know nothing of it. Solomon also realizes that absolutes are not always as absolute as we might hope. In verse 18, he offers us a compromise. It is good that you grasp one thing and also not let go of the other. For the one who fears God comes forth with both of them. So, do we need all the answers? Solomon believes we need to be realistic. He's given us his insight into that which is best. However, he's also made it clear that strictly speaking on this earth, we need to also consider the alternatives. Death is better than birth, but without life, there is absolutely no good end coming to anyone. A funeral is better than a party, but perpetual solemnity will only lead to despair. There's to be joy in life along with reflection. Wisdom's better than riches. But wisdom and riches can work reciprocally with each other. Wisdom can protect our riches. Riches might garner the respect our wisdom deserves. We need to learn from Solomon's experience. We dare not forget his lessons, but neither dare we forget to live as God has intended. The answers may seem absolute, but we need to remember that under the sun there are no absolute. Under the sun, our lives are always to be filled with shades of gray. And it's how we live without all the answers, which most proves the answers we have found. Solomon's given us great advice, but he also tells us to be wise in even how we take that advice. Hold on to both. Now, he's not trying to say hold on to eternity with one hand and this earth with the other, because Solomon's not looking at the eternal question. Solomon is simply saying